Dear City Council, my comments regarding Agenda Item EX35.3, titled Enhanced Security Measures at Toronto City Hall, formerly titled Councillor Protection at City Properties. At a time when most people are wanting to break down barriers, some of the members of Toronto City Council are trying to put up barriers. In case you don't know what barriers mean, especially given this agenda item, let me remind you what the AODA says. The AODA stands for Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It describes barriers as follows. Barrier means anything that prevents a person with a disability from fully participating in all aspects of society because of his or her disability, including a physical barrier, an architectural barrier, an information or communications barrier, an attitudinal barrier, a technological barrier, a policy, or a practice, which in itself becomes the obstacle, which is also a barrier. At a time when most of us are fighting for, advocating for, tirelessly pushing forward to ensure inclusion, some of you are trying to exclude. And again, this is in reference to the barriers and the warrantless searches that you're wanting to conduct at Toronto City Hall. May I remind you of Council Item M as in Mary, M as in Mary 32.8. So that's MM 32.8, which was adopted in October 2017. It's with regards to denouncing acts of hate and intolerance in Toronto. And specifically, number 1 says, City Council denounce racism in all its forms and reaffirm its commitment to recognize the dignity and worth of all people in principle and in practice. Putting up or allowing this item on your agenda to go forward would essentially contradict these policies. I know it's hard sometimes to recognize issues that affect people that don't look like you, especially when our council is made up of a majority of people that don't necessarily reflect the population in the city of Toronto. But as a person of color, I can tell you that there are many forms, as I've identified in your MM 32.8 adopted item, many forms of racism that takes place in the creation of structural barriers and attitudinal barriers and subjective barriers that people just make up randomly in order to hinder people's mobility rights or access rights or rights to even just access their own rights or just to speak. So for me, this agenda item that you have currently before you seeks to contradict some of the policies that you've put into place already that would suggest that you're looking for barrier-free facilities. In fact, your own write-ups and various policies that you have, including accommodation, says that the City of Toronto wants to be barrier-free. And again, to be trying to assume that something horrible will happen. For all the years that City Council has taken place, nothing's happened. We don't prepare in a proactive measure in that way when you're hindering or attempting to breach people's rights. We don't prepare for those things. What we do prepare for is what we do know and what we can foresee. So, for example, Vision Zero, you did well in setting aside $22 million to ensure road safety and cyclist safety, to ensure that people can move freely without harm or fear on the roads, and to minimize environmental hazards that are contributory by vehicles on the roads. That's another topic, but it still ties into what we see as essential needs. And since 2009, when you originally called it the Council Protection Measures, you've been trying to create barriers for people. And I suspect that comes from Toronto Police Services, because they're always trying to find ways to ensure that they can increase their police budget and hire more police officers and think that law enforcement is the way to change things. But it's not. It hasn't worked for all these years. Why would it work today, tomorrow, or the next day? What we need are proactive solutions that are inclusive-minded, one that includes and encourages public participation and civic engagement. We have an election coming up, and you definitely want people to be engaged. And I'm sure some of you who are going for re-election or for election, for those of you who were appointees, want people to vote for you. That means you want people to be engaged. Are you going to put up barriers at voting places that people can't get in to vote? No, you want to make it as accessible as possible so people can vote. So that's the same thing with day-to-day life at City Hall or any other city facility. We should not be creating barriers. We should not be attempting to breach the Charter, the AODA, and the Human Rights Code. We should not be attempting to restrict people's participation, movement, engagement, and even dissent, which is why I think you really want to put these measures up to minimize dissent or people challenging you. Well, that's not a city of Toronto that we want. We want an inclusive city. We want a city that values the participation of the public and encourages it. We want a city that's accessible to all people. And most of all, we want the ability to live and thrive. So know this, when I'm saying to you that if you put forward this measure, if you adopt this measure, know that we will take legal action. And it really would be more waste of resources, both for the public's end and the city's end, even though the city belongs to the public. But I mean, where the public as individuals has to go into their purse to fight an issue that we all know shouldn't be in the first place. So John Tory, Mayor John Tory, stop what you're trying to put forward. You know better. You're a lawyer. Why would you, having known about Justice Jill Copeland's decision as of June 18th, and then say at the Executive Council meeting that I observed online to a lawyer who works there, does this apply to us? Charter issues affect all levels of government. That's if anybody in government breaches the charter, they're liable. You're not allowed to breach people's charter rights. Further, you're not allowed to breach the AODA, and you're not allowed to breach the Human Rights Code. No city policy, bylaw, or anything of the sort supersedes those pieces of legislature. So you'll never be successful other than passing it here and then causing us to fight this in court and be successful at a later date. It will just create more antagonism towards the role of city council and for those of you who think that you're elites, that you are above us and don't consider us. So those are my comments. I'm expecting that the people who are proactive minded at city council, the people who desire to be reelected, the people who desire to be elected if you were just appointed, and the people who do believe in ensuring that people have the ability to live and thrive will come together as one and ensure that this agenda item fails as it rightly should. Because the only way that we're going to succeed, the only way that we're going to get things done is together. And only together we succeed.